Welcome back, history seekers, to another episode of Fistory. After having finished the long, I think it was 6-part episode of the history of the moves in England, I thought I'd take just a little bit of a break and just do maybe a couple of one-shots. And this one is particularly interesting. Now, with all the stuff that's happening sort of in America with release of the Epstein files, I thought it would be interesting to highlight another period from history where a sort of very, very powerful government got taken over and subverted by a very, very dark sort of poisoning ring, secret society, all that kind of stuff. And just sort of point out this isn't really anything new. You could, I guess, sort of debate the causes. Is it the decline of Christianity? Well, this took place during the reign of Louis the XIV. I think it's Louis the XIV. The Sun King, wait, how did you say that in French? Le King de Soleil. Passe-moi de foie gras. But seriously, folks. And it just, this took place in 1677. So just over 100 years before the French Revolution, which of course was riddled with secret societies. Around this period in European history, this was just after 1666, the fall of the Sabbateans. I believe the discovery of the Illuminati was around this period. Chat, can someone tell me when the scandal about the Illuminati broke? I think it was around this period, right? Freemasonry was exploding. There were lodges everywhere. Secret societies were the order of the day, sort of coexisting under what could be sort of, I think, well claimed as the most absolute of the absolute monarchies. Louis the 14th, Louis de Dion, the King of France. He is a symbol of the age of absolutism in Europe, styling himself as Le Roi Soleil, the Sun King, which portrayed him as the supreme leader. He presided over a great expansion of the French colonial empire and patronage of the arts in his court at the Palais du Versailles that dignified the Baroque style of French architecture. His reign of 72 years, durant 5 ans. No, I think I fucked Septor. Oh, man, it's been a long time since I've done French. And 110 days remain the longest of any monarch in history. So this is a very, very stable period. Look at that, right? He's got the tights on. All right, he's looking dashing. It's funny the way fashions change. You know what I mean, right? I'm sure this was regarded as the height of Chadley masculinity, in the sort of mid 17th century, whereas now everyone look at it and be like, bruh, it looks a bit gay, right? Fashions change, is all I'm saying. He began his personal rule of France in 1661 after the death of his chief minister, Cardinal Mazarin. A believer in the divine right of kings, Louis continued this is the other thing about this period of French history, what is known as the Ancien Regime, the ancient regime. The reason it got this name is primarily, did it have this name before the French Revolution? Most of the stuff I know about this period is because of all the stuff I know about the French Revolution. They're constantly sort of referencing l'Ancien regime, right? And all the problems that it started having. I suppose after this Louis' death, right? They started sliding into currency debasement. They had like a lot of like crazy wars, trying to like overextend it as an empire, and and then you got the French Revolution, which I believe started in 1788, and I don't know. Yes, he consolidated a system of absolute monarchy in France that endured until the French Revolution, precisely. Louis XIV enforced uniformity of religion under the Catholic Church, and this is my point, right? You can say, this is due to the decline of Christianity. Well, you literally had sort of Catholicism as the state religion at this point. I mean, perhaps you could make the argument that it is the fusion of church and state that leads to sort of a big discrediting of religion in general. I don't know. His revocation of the Edict of Nantes abolished the rights of the Huguenot Protestant minority and subjected them to a wave of dragonnades. I presume that means like purges, right? So they put soldiers in all their houses and encouraged them to emigrate and convert. Okay. So hang on, let me just. I've got this little bit. The sort of important events from the rule of the Sun King, 1661 to 1700. He took control and famously declared himself "L'État, c'est moi." L'État, c'est moi. I am the state. Obviously, at that time, inventing fascism. It's amazing how fascism was in fact invented in 1661 under absolute monarchy. Of course, we now know in enlightened times that the only way to view any kind of history is through the lens of stuff that happened in the early 20th century. I don't want to hear anyone say that Fist, this is ridiculous. Fascism didn't even exist as a concept back in 1661. Look, it's there in black and white, right? L'État, c'est moi. I am the state, right? So Mussolini clearly time traveled backwards, spoke to Louis XIV, and thus you have the rise of French fascism. I'm so sick of this way of like looking at history. Like literally everything has to be like World War II and its surrounding events. He curtailed noble power, used intendants to enforce royal will in the provinces, and built an opulent palace at Versailles, where the court moved in 1682 as a symbol of absolutism and a tool to control the aristocracy. It is worth remembering that France, like basically all the countries in Europe at that time, were not really sort of nations in the way that we imagine them today, but more sort of a collection of sort of small, I don't know what you'd call them, baronets, noble microstates. There was great variation in language, and this uniformity that would be sort of imposed to make sort of like France like a country really didn't happen until after the French Revolution and the rise of just the horrible bastards that ran that, people like Robespierre and stuff. I really should do a thing on the French Revolution. It's fascinating. Jean-Baptiste Colbert, the finance minister, pursued mercantilist policies promoting industry, trade companies, and a strong navy while reforming taxes. In 1685, he evoked the Edict of Nantes, which we have talked about. Quite a few wars, right? Culturally, France experienced a grand cycle. Grand cycle? I'm not sure how you pronounce that. The Académie Française in 1635 standardized the language. Playwrights like Molière. So by 1700, France was Europe's superpower, but endless wars, heavy taxation, and religious intolerance created fiscal strains and social resentments that foreshadowed the 18th century crises. So there was an attempt to sort of standardize French language even back there with the Académie Française. Anyway, so just a bit of a background for you all. By the way, you can send super chats to the entropy link if you would like to support me in the therapy beers and all that kind of stuff. I may have to be surviving off beers sucked from weird places, given the way the world's going. So all donations gratefully accepted. We will get into the affaire des poissons. Affaire des poissons, right? Which would be affair of the fish. Man, you imagine fucking like parachuting me into France. Like, where is l'England? Affaire des poissons. Poison was a major murder scandal in France during the reign of King Louis XIV between 1677 and 1682. A number of prominent members of the aristocracy were implicated and sentenced on charges of poisoning and witchcraft. The scandal reached into the inner circle of the king and led to the execution of 36 people. Now, do want to point out one significant difference that this had with the, the Epstein unpleasantness that, America is currently going through. These people were tried and executed. So presumably they were not allowed to continue doing their stuff, whereas nothing really substantial has happened to all of the horrible people currently ruling the West. When they went around abolishing the death penalty, I suspect the real reason for this was basically to protect horrible people at the top. I don't think they did it really for the mercy of the poor people at the bottom. In 1672, upon the natural death of cavalry officer Gaudin de Sainte-Croix, an inventory of his papers revealed a box containing 9 letters from his mistress, Marquis de Brinvilliers, as well as the Marquise's acknowledgement of a debt amounting to 30,000 livres. I wonder who he owed it to. The box also contained various vials, which, after being analyzed by an apothecary, were found to have contained various poisons that left little trace in the body. Now, this is sort of like a running theme through, I think, this sort of like period. You have a sort of a situation where women are sort of like bound to their husbands. They often sort of cannot separate from them unless they die. This led to the development in Italy of, what was it called? I did an episode on it, actually. It was like aqua vitae, aqua something, right? It was like the tears of something. It was basically a poison that wives would give to their husbands. It was mainly arsenic, if I recall. Arsenic is like a slow accumulative poison. So if you're like cooking someone's food, you can like put it in over and over and over. It eventually build up and they will die. The case began in 1675 after the trial of de Brinvilliers, who was accused of having conspired with Sainte-Croix to poison her father, Anton Dru d'Elbray, in 1666, and 2 of her brothers, Antoine d'Elbray and Francois d'Elbray, in 1670, in order to inherit their estates. There are also rumors that she had poisoned poor people during her visits to hospitals. So this is basically the accusation is that that's how she tested out the poisons. After being accused, she fled but was arrested in Liege. De Brinvilliers was tortured and confessed, was sentenced to death, and on 17th of July was tortured with the water cure, forced to drink 16 pints of water, and then beheaded, and her body burnt at the stake. Her alleged accomplice, Sainte-Croix, did not face charges because he had died of natural causes in 1672. The sensational trial drew attention to other mysterious deaths, starting rumors. Prominent people, including Louis XIV, became alarmed that they might be poisoned. The affair proper opened in February 1677 after the arrest of Magdalene de Grange on charges of forgery and murder. Lagrange appeared to Francois Michel de Tella, Marquis de Louvois, claiming that she had information about other crimes of high importance. Louvois reported to the king, who told Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie, who among other things was the chief of the Paris police, to root out the poisoners. La Reynie sought to calm the king. The subsequent investigation of potential poisoners led to accusations of witchcraft, murder, and more. Now, when looked at through a modern lens, indeed, the sort of standout book on this topic is this, The Affair of the Poisons by Anne Somerset. You can find this on Anna's archive if you are interested. the classic assumption, of course, is that all of these were just, mostly sort of religious mania. Those crazy Christians, don't you know, not believing in the science as much. And so sort of modern historical or, historiographical sort of examples always sort of like bias all of this through an atheist lens, essentially, and often a very anti-Christian lens. And they just assume that, any accusations of, dark, Satanism and all this kind of like other stuff was just, just Christians, like, they're just having a bad day and, they want to like persecute the, the whoever, because they're Christians, right? Christians be bad. And therefore, I do not take this view, obviously, being Christian myself. So just sort of keep that in mind. Authorities rounded up a number of fortune tellers and alchemists who were suspected of selling not only divinations, seances, and aphrodisiacs, but also, quote, inheritance powders, a euphemism for poison. Some of them confessed under torture and gave authorities lists of their clients who had allegedly bought poisons to get rid of their spouses or rivals in the royal court. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, loyal viewer, goodness me, secret poisonings, Satanism, alchemy, witchcraft, peddlers selling like noxious things. Surely this leads one to think of a certain ethnic group, right? That, of which I have talked about, whose history is entwined with the history of Europe. So I had a bit of a look at the Jewish Encyclopedia. And what I found is that there's very, very little about this period, weirdly enough. In the beginning of the 17th century, the moves began again to penetrate into France. So beginning of the 1600s, this necessitated a new edict in 1615 in which Louis the XIII forbade Christians under the penalty of death and confiscation to shelter Jews or to converse with them. The regency was no less severe. In 1683, Louis XIV expelled the Jews from the newly acquired colony of Martinique. In annexing Alsace and Lorraine, Louis was at first inclined towards the banishment of the Jews living on these provinces, but thought better of it in view of the benefit he could derive from them. And on September 25th, 1675, he granted them letters patent, taking them under his special protection. This, however, did not prevent them from being subjected to every kind of extortion, and their position remained the same as it had under the Austrian government. While the Alsatian Jews were thus laboring under barbarous legislation, the conditions of those of Commat Venaissin, in Avignon, I presume, which belonged to the Holy See, became unbearable. All the additional measures devised against them by the councils during the 15th and 16th centuries were applied to the letter in the second half of the 17th century and afterwards. So the start of emancipation did not really begin until the 1800s, and there's very, very little about this period. They would have sort of been basically banned. But again, I don't mean to sort of be sort of like overly like, oh my God, like, everything is the moose. I just, this sort of this mention of peddlers, powders, poisons, all this kind of like other stuff does, sort of lead me to ask the question. And it would turn out that in this period, there would be no one sort of like openly proclaiming that they were Jewish in this period. And my understanding is that only Catholics were allowed anywhere near Versailles. The most famous case was that of the midwife Catherine de Chaise-Monovizin, or La Voisine, who was arrested in 1679 after she was incriminated by the poisoness Marie Bosset. La Voisine implicated several important courtiers. These included a bunch of people: the Duchess of Bouillon, the Duke of Luxembourg, and most importantly, the king's mistress, Madame de Montespan. You can see Montespan here. Apparently, the king was very, very enamored with her. I mean, you know how these like stories go of these like, monarchs, right? They have like chicks on the side and like many sort of like, bastards and no. Where is the picture of La Voisine? Here we go. Yes, this is La Voisine, Catherine de Chaise-Voisine. La Voisine. Wait. Okay. Questioned whilst intoxicated, Lavasson claimed that Montespan, the king's mistress, had brought aphrodisiacs and performed black masses with her in order to gain and keep the king's favor over rival lovers. She had worked with a priest named Etienne Guibourg, not much of a priest. But again, this is something that we also see in Europe sort of around this period, a little bit earlier, the circulation of sort of like weird sort of grimoires by the church and basically a segment of the Catholic priesthood dabbling in extremely unchristian stuff. There was no evidence beyond her confessions, but bad reputations followed these people afterwards. Eleanor Herman, in her book Sex with Kings, claimed that the police, given reports of babies' bones, uncovered the remains of 2,500 infants in Lavoison's garden. However, Anne Somerset disputes this in her book The Affair of the Poisons and states that there is no mention of the garden being searched for human remains. Again, this is the book. I'll read a bit of it in a second. Also involved in the scandal was Eustace Doya de Cavoye, the eldest living son of a prominent noble family. He was disinherited when, in an act of debauchery, he chose to celebrate Good Friday with a black mass. So I think, I think you probably got a sort of like conflation of sort of edgy boys trying to like buck the system. This is always a problem when you have like a state religion. When people are sort of like trying to rebel against the state, they also wind up rebelling against the religion. And so it sort of opens an opportunity for all this kind of like weird satanic crap. Upon his disinheritance, he opened a lucrative trade in inheritance powders and aphrodisiacs. He mysteriously disappeared after the abrupt ending of Louis' official investigation in 1678. Because of this and his name, he was once suspected of being the man in the Iron Mask. However, this theory has fallen out of favor because it is now known that he was imprisoned by his family in the Prison Saint-Lazare. Man in the Iron Mask, of course, is that story about the guy who was imprisoned, I believe, in the Bastille, and he had an iron mask fastened over his face. No one could see his face. And the rumor was that he was one of the illegitimate sons of, I think, Louis the XIV, one of the Louis. Lavoison was sentenced to death for witchcraft and poisoning and burned at the stake on the 22nd of February, 1680. Marshal Montmorency Bouteville, man, the names of these people, was briefly jailed in 1680, but was later released and became a captain of the guard. Minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert helped to hush things up. Yes, you wouldn't really want this getting out to the plebs. Very, very bad look. De la Renaise re-established the special court, the Chambre Ardente. So basically, this caused the establishment of a sort of secret French Inquisition that was meant to flush out heretics. It was known as the Fiery Chamber, I believe, is the literal translation. Yes, although Le Chambre Ardente, I don't know, ardent. I don't think that means like fire. Anyway, it's what we would call now, I guess, like a star chamber, a secret court, backed presumably by what government sort of intelligence agencies existed at the time. The special courts designated for the exclusive trials of heretics in France were first instituted in 1545. And then I guess they died out and then they were like resurrected, essentially. The special court ultimately came to have a reputation of sending to the flames as many as fell into its hands and gained the unofficial designation of La Chambre Ardente. Despite its reputation, an examination of 323 case histories pertaining to individuals on trial during a 23-month time reveals that many of those arrested and put on trial for heresy escaped a dire punishment. By the way, this is something that you actually find with a lot of these inquisitorial courts. The Spanish Inquisition is like this, despite its fearsome reputation. It actually killed like relatively few people. I think it's just, like sort of like a modern sort of things, and probably the Moors don't like it as well, because they definitely went after conversos and people who were just pretending to be Christians. So the poison affair implicated 442 suspects. 367 were arrest orders were issued. 218 were carried out. Of the condemned, 36 were executed. 5 were sentenced to the galleys and 23 to exile. This excludes those who died in custody by torture or suicide. Additionally, many accused were never brought to trial but placed outside the justice system and imprisoned for life by a lettre de cachette, which I think is basically sort of like a royal order, essentially. Right, so let us read from some of the affair of the poisons. Again, as I said, this is a modern book written by a woman who is almost certainly an atheist, and so therefore all beliefs of the supernatural will be considered suspect and poo-pooed, and no. So this is from page 144. The style of this book is quite sort of some history books you find they sort of cross over into sort of like novella territory in the way that they're written, right? Like, there's a lot of like extra color added, and the author will try and like sort of see from inside and reimagine the scene. Well, that's like historical fiction, right? I would prefer that they, stuck to the facts. While not extinct by 1679, belief in witchcraft was on the decline in sophisticated circles, but perceptions of the devil remained extremely vivid. To the preacher Bousset, for example, the reality of the devil was very evident. You see, because he had not been enlightened. In one of his sermons, he stated firmly that it was universally acknowledged truth upheld by scripture that there are in the world certain sorts of malicious spirits. On another occasion, he declared that the devil had always had his own altars, temples, mysteries, and sacrifices where his disciples congregated. Bousset thundered that the evil one gloried in the impure ceremonies that were celebrated by his ministers, and which, though based on Christian forms of worship, were really a foul parody of it. Precisely. The devil dominated people's consciousness in a way that today we can hardly grasp. Yeah, well, I think it's coming back. More than one of Louis XIV's contemporaries wrote of the way that his fear of the devil influenced his behavior, and the dread inspired by Satan was all-pervasive. The counterpart to living in an age of faith when religion afforded comfort to so many was that the devil was not conceived of as some remote entity, but rather as a malign being who could be visualized with horrible clarity. Imagine that. Therefore, when it emerged that divineresses and other members of the Paris underworld were offering to conjure up evil spirits for clients or to forge pacts with the devil, it did not seem entirely fanciful to accept that communications of this sort might be possible. Fucking modern women. In 1680, when numerous people were arrested at court because they had consulted divineresses, fortune tellers, basically, the Marshal de Villeroy commented, "These gentlemen and ladies believe in the devil and do not believe in God." Yeah. Perhaps he was right. Like she believes that. But it does not follow that the two were mutually exclusive. Certainly, Louis XIV's faith in God did not preclude him from being dreadfully afraid of the devil. Even people who were not particularly superstitious and who would have repudiated the notion that spells and sorceries could yield results, harmful or otherwise, would have been open to the idea that those who dabbled in such things could represent a menace to society. What a silly idea. Through the ages, witchcraft and poisoning had been held to be naturally affiliated, with many authorities maintaining that the devil enhanced witches' power to do harm by supplying them with deadly powders. Madame de Brinvillier's confessor had told her that the two activities were so inextricably intertwined that in the Bible, the word witch was synonymous with poisoner. The affair of the poisons would reinforce the perception that a strong connection existed. During that episode, several cases would come to light when attempts to practice magic had ultimately led to much worse things. Oh, imagine that. Few people came to the divineress. That's a stupid word. Few people came to the fortune tellers with the express intention of purchasing poison. On the whole, they began by complaining of their husband or some other individual who irked them, and the fortune teller would hold out the hope that their death could be brought about by supernatural means. So it's like the early version of ChatGPT, right? You've got a discontented wife. It comes like, you should go and see Madam So-and-so. And Madam So-and-so is like, it's a terrible situation that you're in, that you should have to put up with your bore of a husband, right? He's so rich. you just see how this is going to go, right? Wait. It was only when this failed to achieve the desired result, the spells, right, failed to achieve the desired result, which presumably would be like, please make my husband very loving and stop him from drinking and being an asshole and working so much, and typical wifely complaints, I imagine. It's only when this failed to achieve the desired result that they became ready to countenance murder. For the spells that had proved so harmless to the intended victim invariably had a corrupting effect on the perpetrators. Having already parted with a great deal of money and unwilling to endure disappointment, the client found it easier to take on board that poison could provide an acceptable solution. Thus, merely by consulting with the fortune tellers, the client had set in motion a cycle of moral degradation, which led to crimes that would once have seemed unthinkable. Okay, this is a very, very sound view. Perhaps I was too harsh on Miss Summers. For this reason, even those who did not believe that witches possessed magical powers had no doubt of their capacity for evil. The Duchesse d'Orléans, who prided herself on her robust common sense, commented that it was obviously wrong to burn reputed witches for having flown down the chimney mounted on a broomstick, but all too often serious crimes would be laid at their door. In such cases, harsh treatment was in order, and if it could be shown that they had handled poisons or committed sacrilege, they cannot be punished too severely. Madame Le Rainy was convinced that the arrest of Mademoiselle Boisset and Mademoiselle Vigoureux would prove pregnant with consequence. He was not surprised when preliminary interrogations indicated that they were known to each other and had sometimes worked together. Furthermore, so this is getting more into sort of like the details of this. This is a very, very detailed account. Let me see. I've got some like more stuff. Here we go. This is from Britannica. Excuse me just a second. The affair of the poisons, one of the most sensational criminal cases of 17th century France, revealed in 1679 an inquiry that nobles, prosperous bourgeois, and the common people alike had been resorting secretly to female fortune tellers, at that time numerous in Paris, for drugs and poisons, for black masses, and for other criminal purposes. Nicolas de la Reynie, whose diligent investigation took 3 years, headed the inquiry. A special tribunal for the trial of the accused, known as the Chambre Ardente, was created in April 1679. It held 210 sessions at the Arsenal in Paris, issued 319 writs of arrest, and sentenced 36 persons to death, including the poisoner La Voisson, Catherine Deschet's Madame Monon Voisson, who was burned. Among the many members of French society who were implicated was Madame de Montespan, the mistress of King Louis XIV. She was accused by Voisson's daughter and her accomplices of being a customer of La Voisson from 1667 and resorting to magic and philters, that's potions, love potions, to be precise, to win the king's love, of participating in black masses and attempting to poison her young rival, Mademoiselle de Fontaine, and the king. So she was accused by Voisson's daughter of attempting to poison the king. I don't know, like, why she'd want to poison the king. Poisoning her younger rival, I can absolutely see. I don't know why. Louis suspended the public proceedings after the accusations against Madame de Montespan, but ordered the continuation of the inquiry in secret. Thus, most of the chief offenders who had managed by their accusations to transform a criminal trial into an affair of state escaped execution and ended their lives in various provincial prisons. The charges concerning black masses and attempted poisonings were never proved, against Madame de Montespan. Now, I have a feeling that this is probably framed in Summers' book as a sort of early version of the Salem witch trials. A outbreak of mass hysteria. But that doesn't seem to be the case at all. The way this is always basically framed is that strong, powerful women, knowledge women, cunning women, right, who deal in innocent things like herbs, and they'll help you get an abortion, which would have been illegal, right? They would sell abortifacients and other kinds of home remedies. Were accused by Christians who were anti-science, right, and who were anti the use of herbs and nature. Always unjustly accused. They never did anything wrong. Obviously, the patriarchy. If you've ever known any people into this crap, you hear this basically all the time. None of the witches ever did anything wrong, bro. It's just them Christians. They can't hack it. And thus, every single witch that was burned was burned unjustly, and just they never did anything wrong. This seems to be a much more accurate sort of tale of what's going on. If you're selling abortifacients, why not sell poisons? Honestly, there's a shade difference between the two, and the herbs that you use for them as well. Henbane, nightshade, all of these kinds of things. Arsenic. So it's not surprising. A lot of these people also would sell sort of divination. I'll read your palm, I'll read your card or whatever, and sort of become I guess kind of agony aunts for the rich. It does seem to me that Catholicism must have been declining sort of quite sharply at this point. This was also sort of the rise of science and the scientific worldview around this time. Who was that guy? I know this was a little bit later, but when the French Revolution broke out, there was a guy who was an incredibly influential scientist. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he worked with gases, and he was, he's still remembered today as discovering some really important scientific stuff. Had a lab in Versailles. Does anyone know, chat, what that guy's name is? Lavoisier, Anton Lavoisier. Let's see, I just have to ask chat, and it pops into my brain. So this could be sort of the period where sort of science was rising and all this kind of other stuff. Clearly a lot of people thought that whatever was going on with the Catholic Church, it wasn't working too well, which is why you would have these these people looking for sort of other things. Let's see if we've got anything else in this book. This is a really, really, really long book, and I don't really want to read the whole thing because it is very, very detailed and kind of retarded. Okay, so there was executions. Oh, here we go. So this is about La Voisson. Following the arrest of Mademoiselle Vigoret and Marie Bosset in early January 1679, their houses had been searched. Substances discovered there were taken away to be analyzed, and suspicions mounted against Marie Bosset when a casket belonging to her was found to contain not only disturbing items such as nail clippings and samples of menstrual blood, but also arsenic, cantharides, and nitric acid. You really don't want this kind of shit spreading in your society. Things looked even worse when Mademoiselle Vigoret disclosed that Mademoiselle Marguerite de Poulalion was a client of hers and La Bosset. La Vigoret maintained that this lady, who came from a good family in Bordeaux and was married to a well-to-do bureaucrat, had come to them to have her fortune read and to borrow money. Interesting. So So they not only read fortunes, sold poisons, but also did loan sharking. Okay, right? Okay, my suspicions are aroused at this. I don't know, man. I don't know. However, it seemed likely that there had been more to it than that, for Mademoiselle de Pouillon had recently been put into a convent by her husband after he had been warned that she was trying to kill him. Okay. Further interest was aroused when Mademoiselle Vigoret revealed that Labossière was on friendly terms with a woman called Mademoiselle Filbert. The latter was now a wife of a court musician, but some years ago, her first husband had died in suspicious circumstances. La Vigoret also provided the first intimation that people at court might be implicated in the affair when she mentioned that the Marquis de how am I supposed to pronounce that? The Marquis de had asked her to devise a way of protecting him against being wounded in battle. Sensing that this would be a forerunner of more significant disclosures, on 6th of January, Monsieur de la Reynie requested the king's authorization to take personal charge of the inquiry that was speedily granted. So basically, this starts out as a relatively sort of low-level inquiry into sort of, witches and diviners and a poisoning ring. And before you know it, much like that case that did Epstein of, him soliciting girls in Florida, and before you know it, it's going up the chain, and no. On the 1st of February, Mademoiselle de Pouillon was arrested and taken to Vincennes. A former servant of hers, Perrine Delbarre, was also taken into custody and before long poured forth a wealth of compromising information about her employer. It emerged that Mademoiselle de Pouillon had been having an affair with the self-styled Marquis de la Rivière, an immensely charming adventurer, who supported himself by preying on susceptible women. When people had attempted to alert Mademoiselle de Pouillon to what was going on, to alert Monsieur de Pouillon to what was going on, but he did not listen, for he doted on his attractive young wife to such an extent that one kind word from her was enough to keep him happy. Many such cases. So you see, this just goes on and on in really sort of like more detailed stuff. I guess I'll just keep reading this. We've got like another 15 minutes. Chat, is this too detailed? Fuck it. Unfortunately, Monsieur de la Rivière was so expensive. Was so expensive to maintain that Madame de Pouillon had found herself in constant need of money. If her husband gave her a new dress, she at once pawned it to raise cash for her lover. Bro. But the sums raised in this way were soon dissipated. Desperately, she had formed plans to break into her husband's study to steal a valuable pair of hangings, and even had a key cut to enable her to take money out of his strongbox. However, after a series of farcical mishaps, all these schemes had come to nothing. Man, he must have been some guy. These tropes never change through history. By now, Madame de Pouillon had begun having consultations with Madame Vigoret, the fortune teller, and after hearing her plight, La Vigoret sent her to see Marie Bosset, who I presume was like another fortune teller. Matters had then taken a grimmer turn. After paying several visits to Madame de Pouillon's country house, La Bosset had instructed her to furnish her with some of Monsieur de Pouillon's shirts, together with some arsenic, which Madame de Pouillon had originally purchased to use as rat poison. La Bosset had then combined the arsenic with soap and washed the shirt with it, claiming that when Monsieur de Pouillon next wore the shirt, his lower parts would become painful and inflamed. Okay, I don't know how that's supposed to work. Why would your lower parts become inflamed? I mean, I don't know. Madame Napoleon may have led to hope that the effects would prove fatal, although she later claimed that she had simply intended to rob her husband's strongbox while he was bedridden with this complaint. Now, I just want to point this out. These fortune teller women seem to sort of be like anti-priests, essentially. Again, I said like Chat GPT for the age. If Madame de Napoleon had seen a priest, then he would have doubtless encouraged her to, not take this attractive younger lover, try and, reconcile with her husband, stop stealing his crap, and, but clearly the advice that she was getting from the fortune teller was like, oh, you deserve this young lover. Your husband is a brute. It's totally okay that you're like stealing money from him. After all, perhaps she would have said, this is clearly true love. In the card Le Tarot, I have seen that you are destined to be together. You will divorce your husband who you do not like and ride off into the sunset with your young lover. Incidentally, thank you very much. That will be God, please. Money, please. You see this trend with charlatan fortune tellers, like through the ages, basically. They become like therapists in that sense, right? They tell the client what they want to hear. This is why a lot of the clients of these people tend to be women. We have therapists in this day and age that basically do exactly the same shit. Instead of consulting the charts or the woo woo, they consult their books on psychotherapy. But again, it's that same kind of like encouraging women. Oh yes, your complaints are terrible. You should leave your brute of a husband and go and live with your young lover. I'm sure that he absolutely loves you and not just for the money. Incidentally, I think this is a big reason actually why some of these like women get drawn to these kind of like fortune tellers in the first place. Not just for, weird shit like love potions and aphrodisiacs, but, oh, Madame Fortune Teller, please, can you tell me, does he really love me? Or is he just in it for the money, right? Like, they'll take some like, young lover or something. Does my husband know that I have been unfaithful? And you can see how this kind of relationship like starts spiraling into like bad places. In fact, it is doubtful that Monsieur Napoleon would have been harmed by wearing the shirt, although La Bosse assured her client that she had received excellent results in the past. But in the event, this was never put to the test. After being treated by La Bosse, the shirt acquired such a noticeably brown tinge that Madame Napoleon decided it was impossible to use it. Wife, why has my shirt turned brown? Imagine being the husband. Oh, wife, why is my favorite shirt suddenly gone brown? Oh, husband, I had it washed in arsenic by a fortune teller in order to poison you that you may be sick for a couple of days, and I can break into your strongbox to steal some gold to give to my young lover who I hope to run away with. Oh, God. This would unironically make an excellent soap opera. Like, why hasn't someone made a soap opera out of it? Maybe they have, right? However, far from giving up altogether, yes, heaven forfend, far from giving up this stupid bint, Madame Napoleon twice gave her servant vials of liquid and ordered her to add the contents to her husband's wine. That's in no way sussy. On both occasions, the frightened servant poured the liquid away. Oh my God. Imagine that scene, right? You're a servant working for some like noble family, okay, right? As far as you're concerned, they're both crazy, right? But the wife clearly has like a screw loose and there's something wrong. You probably know she has like a young lover. you don't want to get involved, right? You just want to like do your job, right? Like maybe go home and like see your family. This will be at some big country estate somewhere, right? The wife comes up and is like, oh, I need you to secretly add this to his wine. You would be like shitting yourself. Imagine if you got found out, right? And like turned into the cops, the monsieur would be furious with me. Mate, fucking dude. On both occasions, a frightened servant poured the liquid away, so Monsieur d'Apollon came to no harm. But when, towards the end of 1678, he received several anonymous warnings that his wife had attempted to murder him, and this eventually persuaded him that his own safety demanded that he should place her in a convent. Now, this is quite interesting. I wonder who wrote these anonymous letters. Was it one of the servants? Was it perhaps one of like the fortune tellers that Madame d'Apollon had gone to, right? Like, you must keep paying me money or I will write to your husband and tell him that you have been trying to poison him. Neither would surprise me, honestly, right? Even this did not stop the determined Madame d'Apollon. In December, she left her convent to visit Marie Bosset and Madame Vigouroux in Paris, and they agreed that a final effort must be made to poison Monsieur Pallion. Accordingly, Madame Bosset had enlisted the services of a fruit seller, Anne Chiron, and Francois Bellon, a member of the Royal Guard. Bellon had boasted that he had a secret way of poisoning silver cups, so infallible that if 50 people drank out of it, even after it had been washed and rinsed, they would all die. Okay? Okay. At the very beginning of January 1679, Le Chiron had provided Bellon with the live toad he said he needed, and at La Bosset's house, they had together set about torturing the poor animal to render it into the right condition for their purposes. After it had been beaten, they forced arsenic into its mouth on the assumption that if the creature urinated during its death throes, its piss would prove to be highly toxic. Ah, Santa Maria. You see a lot of this kind of crap, by the way, right? Like in this, like in grimoires and this, like it's fucking mental, like schizophrenic tier shit, right? A cup supplied by Madame d'Apollon was then treated with this noxious fluid. Dead toad and arsenic pee. I say, wife, that is a lovely vintage of red. What do you call it? This is sort of, this whole stuff is sort of like the first groping towards things like chemistry and toxicology and a lot of sciences that we would take for granted now was sort of being groped towards in this really, really retarded way around this period. However, before the cup could be used, Marie Bosset and Madame Vigouroux had been arrested on the 4th of January. Well, lucky for Monsieur Pollion is all I can say. As La Rainey amassed more information, so a number of people in custody grew. Francois Bellon and Anne Chenon joined Marie Bosset at Vincennes. In March, orders were given for the arrest of Madame Filbert. There were now strong suspicions that she had murdered her first husband, Monsieur Brunet. So it started just spreading out, basically, right? Like they arrested like one person, put them to the question, they started dobbing in other people, and it turns out that this kind of stuff was rampant. There were a bunch of these fortune tellers / poisoners / women operating in Paris, and everyone was using them, I guess. So I hope you enjoyed that. I guess I'll wrap it up there with the end of the tale of Monsieur and Madame Pollion. That's freaking crazy. I don't know. I don't know whether there's any more in this. So I guess I could probably find the bit where they, it goes up to like the royal family. I don't know. Anyway, I just wanted to sort of like highlight this, that governments being sort of corrupted by this kind of like crap is not new. And for all of the, oh yes, we're so advanced now, we have mobile phones and digital watches and we believe in like science and quantum mechanics and all this kind of other stuff. The same sort of impulses that bring these kind of like women to fortune tellers and that kind of like stuff is still out there, and it's not likely to go away anytime soon. And all of this like weird crap is like still out there, and a lot of it is basically just retarded. Let's just say a quick goodbye to everyone in the chat. Oh no, YouTube. We have Kurt Darling, Arden Party, 007, good to see you, mate. Top Rob, good to see you as well. Torture Wyatt, Seti Sapiente, Mount Hazel. Who else have we got? Must have some like more people. CSI, good to see you, mate. I think that's everybody. Andrew's Animatics, good to see you. Don't know what's up with my mouth today. I need to do more mouth exercises. Proper Pictures, good to see you too, mate. Mass Creation Broadcast, good to see you. Yes, the Eunuch, of course. Good to see you, Yiz. Check out Yiz's show, Discord and Dragons, tonight. I forget what time Discord and Dragons starts. Drop a link in the chat, Yiz. Rhetorically Defective. Oh, good to see you too, mate. How you doing? I think that's everybody. Apologies, anyone I missed. On Rumble, we have Teabag and Therapist, Mikey Bikey. Anyone else on Rumble? I think that's everybody. And on Odyssey, just use the Eunuch. Mate. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed that. I'll dig through this and see if there's any other more like retarded like stuff. I'm currently sort of like getting stuff together to start my series on Christian Zionism, but I just thought this would be like sort of an interesting diversion while I sort of like get all of that together. Thank you so much for coming, everybody, and I will see you next week on Monday. I will be on Artie and Fist tomorrow night with Rhetorically Defective, and on Wednesday or Thursday, I forget which, I'll be releasing the next episode of Clown-Based Lifeforms with Aaron from Clowntown Chronicle, where we're talking about the conspiracy pyramid once again. So I do hope you will come along for those. Good night, everybody. Bye.
Fistory.